Hey guys, Noah Dean here. I want to briefly discuss the NCAA rule regarding helmet-to-helmet collisions. Now, obviously, the addition of the rule is a result of the evidence showing potentially devastating effects of hard hits. However, I want to prove here that only an official educated in physics, biomechanics, motor behavior, and other facets of exercise science can make a fair assessment of the rule. Now, as it currently reads, the NCAA rulebook states the rule in two parts. One, no player shall initiate contact and target an opponent with the crown of his helmet. When in question, it is a foul. Number two, no player shall initiate contact and target a defenseless opponent above the shoulders. When in question, it is a foul. Now, these seem pretty straightforward. The problem I want to illuminate is the in question components. As I'll show here, a truly educated official is needed to enforce this rule in a fair manner. And I mean more educated than your typical, the typical officials that we are used to. As an example, I'm going to get evidence from a call made in the 2011 Texas A&M versus University of Texas football game held in College Station, Texas. Now, for those of you who don't know, a personal foul was called on a Texas A&M defensive back after a collision with a University of Texas receiver. At the time, the Aggies were winning by 1 point, and there was a little over a minute left in the game. Now, the penalty may have played a considerable role in the outcome of the game, as the 15-yard and first down consequence of the foul put the Longhorns in a position to win the game, which they did with a field goal. Here's the clip.
McCoy firing, and he almost had that.
Personal foul. Unnecessary reckless on the defense of the player. Targeting. 15-yard penalty. First down.
Ball thrown out just in front of the outstretch. I got it, guys.
What?
Why?
Come on.
Why?
Yeah.
Why right there?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a little nudge with his helmet to helmet,
Yeah.
but he easily could have blown him up.
Yeah.
I mean, he laid off. That's not a good
he
call.
laid off. Terrible call.
Okay, as I showed the clip in slow motion, I want to pause it right about here. Now, there are a few things, a few points I want to make about what we're looking at. First off, I want to stress that the collision is going to happen in about 450 milliseconds from this point. So in less than half a second, the receiver and the defensive back are going to collide. I tell you this to emphasize how fast this all happens. Secondly, I want to talk about the receiver, Mr. Mike Davis. Now, at this point, he's traveling in a straight trajectory at about 7.62 meters per second. Now, that's moving for a football player. Now, he weighs about 186 pounds if we consider gear, cleats, helmets, pads, material, perhaps even sweat he's accumulated. We're looking at about 195 pounds total with Mr. Davis. Now, if we consider his velocity of 7.62 meters per second and his mass, he's got momentum that is a bone-crushing almost 700 kilograms meters per second. I mean, that's pretty impressive. It's going to take a lot of power, both by him and an external source, to bring him to a stop. Now let's focus on the defensive back, Mr. Hunter. His arms are flared wide, as you see here, and his right foot is planted down to his right. That's simply because he's making a direction change. He's planting his foot. He was moving towards the line of scrimmage, but once the ball was thrown, he recognized that, and he's now cutting laterally to meet the receiver. Now, even at this point, his objective is to make a tackle, not because he wants to hit a defenseless player, but because at this point he hasn't recognized the ball wasn't caught. You can see the ball just past the hands of the receiver. Now, to make a long story short, Mr. Hunter has a few motor behavior stages to get through. He must look for and verify that the ball has not been caught. He must make a decision based on that verification, and he needs to translate that information into a physical response. All in all, this is going to take about 200 milliseconds, these three processes that I've mentioned. So let's go ahead and skip forward about 200 milliseconds. Okay, So at this point, we are only a quarter of a second away from impact. Now, Mr. Hunter, at this point, he knows a few things. He knows the ball was not caught. He knows he must not tackle the receiver, but he also knows that the collision is inevitable. There's no physical way to stop this collision, and he knows it. Now, this is where an educated referee and an uneducated referee are going to differ. An uneducated referee will see the following action as a display of aggression, or as the NCAA rulebook states, a targeting of a defenseless player. An educated referee will see the following action as a result of an inevitable collision and the defender simply protecting himself. Now let me move forward here. Now, as you can see, Mr. Hunter leans toward the defender. He draws in both arms, he lowers his head, and he actually pushes away with his inside arm, which would be the right arm here. Now, these actions are textbook procedures for a player protecting himself. If he doesn't lean into the defender, he's not compensating for the upcoming impact. That could easily throw him off his balance, throw him onto the ground, and that could result in an injury to himself. By bringing his right arm in and then pushing toward the defender upon impact, he's deflecting and absorbing some of that force as produced by the momentum that I mentioned earlier. And by lowering his head and shoulder, he's drawing into a protective, almost self-preservation stance with the helmet and the shoulder pads taking the brunt of the collision, or the force of the collision. Now, further proof that these actions are an act of defense is the lack of arm wrapping, if you will. Tacklers are taught to wrap around, and we see no motions whatsoever that this person is intended to wrap around and be aggressive in that manner. And we also see no evidence of an explosive force into the receiver. When people are making a tackle or being aggressive with hard hits, they will make sure to explode, and you will see that. They'll use their legs, and they will explode into the player. But instead, we see a mild lean inward, and that is simply to counter the impact force. Now, for my last bit of evidence that such a call is completely unjustified is the moment directly after the discussed collision. Now, the momentum of the defensive back, Mr. Hunter, and the collision with the receiver carries him into the sideline well off balance. But even so, when he comes to his own coach or staff of some sort with the Aggies, the same actions are carried out. You see a lowered shoulder and helmet, and his inside arm is positioned to push away or a push against the collision. I'm just giving you further proof that this is a defensive response. I mean, would a referee label this as worthy of a personal foul towards his own coach? I would hope not. Now, all in all, my point here was to expose the fact that at least some Division I officials are not educated enough in physics, biomechanics, and or motor behavior to officiate a game in a fair manner. The play used as an example here would not be questionable at all. There would not be any question whatsoever that there was no maliciousness. In fact, it would be obvious to an educated person that the collision was not malicious by either party, the receiver or the defensive back. Now, of course, the skeptics out there will dismiss this evidence and claim that I have a bias of some sort, but the facts speak for themselves. And just on a side note, I would like to dedicate this video to Trent Hunter. He was labeled with a foul that was inexcusable. That foul was completely unjustified, and he did a great job. He did just what a football player is supposed to do. And I guess thanks for your time.